The biggest part of our digital transformation is changing the way we think by Simi and Preston.
A pleasant morning to each and everyone present here. We welcome you all to ABC 10 International Conference on Digitalization, Innovation, Transformation and Sustainability in Business Management and Social Science. I, Jalaj Gupta,
and I, Megha Chittoria,
will be the anchors for the event.
Digitalization, big data, connectivity, and artificial intelligence are shaping today's cities around the globe. It has led to increased productivity, competition, and inclusion within and across the economies. Governments, as well as private organizations, are trying to implement social protection schemes to enable e-health, online education, and digital technologies, which have helped businesses in continuing their operations and trade through e-commerce and digital finance.
Digitalization has been a prominent channel for economies in the attainment of their sustainable development goals. Businesses are using digital tools to map their environmental footprint and assess the impact of environmental shift on their businesses.
And today, Amity Business School takes this great opportunity to discuss a topic very crucial for today's business management and social sciences.
Amity Business School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, has achieved a distinct presence for itself over the years. It has emerged as a premier institute known for its state-of-the-art infrastructure, industry-integrated curriculum, and experienced and highly qualified faculty.
The institute has a proven track record of excellence in imparting management education and is in relentless pursuit of upgrading its knowledge base with an emphasis on blended classroom teaching and practical application through on-the-job training modules in the corporate world. I feel proud and delighted to inform you that Amity Business School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, has been featured in the top business schools in the latest Business Today ranking.
We would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of our eminent guests.
The visionary Honorable Vice Chancellor, Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, Ati Vishesh Seva Medal.
Sir, you have our gratitude. I extend my welcome to Professor William Conwell, Provost and Professor at American University in the Emirates, Dubai.
We are extremely grateful to you. I welcome Professor Vivek Suneja, Dean, Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I greet Madam Gayatri Sharma, Head of Communications, India and South Asia, Rolls-Royce.
Your presence is gratifying.
I welcome Professor Michael Keppel, Higher Education Consultant, Sydney, Australia.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Respected Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. M.P. Kaushik.
Thank you, sir, for gracing this delightful morning. Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Anil Vashisht.
Sir, thank you for being a strong pillar of support for each and every Amitian. It's my privilege to appreciate the presence of all the faculty members and students present in this auspicious gathering.
We are grateful to you.
Light fades away darkness. Light symbolizes knowledge and wisdom free will. To make this morning a blessed one, invoke Ma Saraswati by kindling the lamp of knowledge and wisdom. For seeking the choicest blessing for the same,
Ma, we pray for your blessings with all humility and devotion. Give us the wisdom to make the world a finer and fortunate place.
We have Professor Dr. Anil Vashisht, whose brilliance emulates his intellectual acuity, a righteous pillar of wisdom whose moral support has been the foundation of each and every Amitian's trust today in India and abroad. Dr. Anil Vashisht, Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, and Director of Amity Business School, is a prolific learner at heart and an academician to the core, an engineer in electronics, MBA in marketing, and PhD in management. Dr. Vashisht is a person of high integrity and knowledge.
With an extensive experience of 20 years in institutional building, teaching, consultancy, research, and industry is reflected in his dynamic approach and personality. Having worked with leading business groups of India like Reliance Industries Limited and Trident Group, he has developed an eye for details and expertise in the area of marketing, production management, and supply chain management. Dr. Vashish has traveled across the world understanding the global management education scenario in universities like Harvard, Stanford, MIT Sloan, and Kellogg's Business School. A dynamic personality, an excellent orator, and an able academician. Here, I welcome him for the opening remarks.
Thank you, anchors. My greetings to our dynamic leader and visionary, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. M. P. Kaushik, guest and keynote speakers, Professor William Cornell, Provost, American University in the Emirates, Dubai, Professor Dr. Vivek Suneja, Dean Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University, Madam Gayatri Sharma, Head of Communications, India and South Asia, Rolls-Royce, Professor Michael Keppel, Higher Education Consultant, Sydney, Australia, Registrar, Deans, Directors, faculty members, and dear students. The topic of the international conference, Digitalization, Innovation, Transformation, and Sustainability in Business Management and Social Sciences, is in alignment to the post-COVID scenario of the world. The innovative transformation through digitization has brought out sustainable businesses across the globe. In the last few years, world has gone through so much and has come out stronger in terms of learning and ways to create sustainable business models. The Indian startup ecosystem has grown by leaps and bounds. The UPI payment mechanism is going great in terms of digitalization of payments. Overall, the Indian economy at this point is poised for a big fight. The stalwarts today will soon be sharing their words of wisdom who have joined us from different parts of the world. I am extremely thankful to all of them. Today is going to be a very enriching day for all the students, faculty, and stakeholders who have joined us on Zoom and are watching us live on YouTube. I once again like to welcome all distinguished dignitaries from industry and academia for giving their valuable time to this international conference at Amity Business School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you all to the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, Ati Vishet Seva Medal. Sir is an alumnus of the erstwhile King George School located at Chel, Shimla. He joined the boarding school at the age of 10 years and passed his All India Higher Secondary Examination in 1968 in first class. Thereafter, he joined the prestigious National Defence Academy and passed out as a permanent commissioned army officer from the Indian Military Academy in March 1972.
He was granted the President's Commission in the Corps of Signals of the Indian Army, which he served with distinction for almost 40 years. During his service, he held several command and staff appointments and participated in Operation Rakshak and Operation Vijay Kargil War. He also served for almost 7 years in the J&K Valley in Srinagar in ranks of captain, colonel, and brigadier.
General Sharma has also been an excellent academician, in addition to being a military leader. He did his BE in Electronics and Communication Engineering from College of Military Engineers in Pune and Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, MCTE, Mau. Masters of Engineering from Pune University and Masters of Management Studies from Osmania University, all in first class with honors, standing first in the order of merit of all programs.
He has also been an instructor at Institute of Armament Technology, Girinagar, Pune, which has now been redesignated as Defense Institute of Armament Technology, DIAT. He retired after 40 years of distinguished military service as the commandant of his alma mater, the Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, MCTE, located at Mau, which is a center of excellence in electronics communication, information technology, and cyber warfare. During service in the army, he has traveled to almost every nook and corner of the country and also headed military delegations to France, Germany, and USA. For his meritorious service to the nation, he was awarded the Ati Vishesh Seva Medal by the Honorable President of India on 26 January 2011. He has also held the appointment of Colonel Commandant of the Corps of Signals for a period of almost 4 years.
He is currently the founder vice chancellor of Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Gwalior. Under his able leadership, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh has seen exponential growth and has been adjudged the best private university in Madhya Pradesh in 2014 and continuously for the last 3 years from 2017 to 2019 and again in 2022.
The university has also been awarded Excellence in Higher Education by CMAI in 2017. Dialogue India has also ranked Amity University Madhya Pradesh as the 10th best private university at national level. He has also been instrumental in introducing a host of best practices aimed at fostering academic excellence in the university. He has also held the additional charge of Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Maharashtra, Mumbai from August 2020 to April 2022. Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Gwalior was ranked amongst the best 200 universities by NIRF in 2020, and the Engineering School of the university has been ranked 153 at the national level by NIRF Rankings 2022. The university was able to achieve placement of 98% of students of the batch, which graduated in June 2022.
General Sharma has been in the field of higher education for a period of more than 10 years as a Vice Chancellor and continues to contribute towards national growth in the field of higher education. Our smiles indicate our warmth and happiness in having you here, sir. I welcome you to address this auspicious gathering.
Thank you very much for this very detailed introduction, which was not required really to that extent. The dignitaries who joined us today, Professor William Conwell, Professor Dr. Vivek Suneja, Madam Gayatri Sharma, Professor Michael Keppel, Dr. M.P. Kaushik, the Pro Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Anil Vishisht, the Director, Amity Business School and Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Naresh Kedia, the Organizing Secretary for this conference, all the faculty members, HOIs, HODs, and all the participants who have joined us today for this conference. I extend a hearty welcome to all of you. And the topic for the conference, digitization, innovation, transformation, and sustainability in business management and social sciences is so apt, especially being conducted after the pandemic is over and when the businesses and the social sciences are coming back to the new normal. Various processes which were in place earlier are being redefined, being rethought of, innovated, new methodologies like work from home culture, reduction in office space, reduction in expenses, reduction in travel are being formulated. The finances are being re-looked into. The methodology of doing something new is being thought over, and all that what is happening today, we all know which is happening on ground. There are many businesses which have closed down, but there are also a number of new businesses which have come up. Also, the digitalization is something which has been facilitated because of the availability of the internet, the high speeds, the rates of data transfer, with 5G coming up now in most of the cities and towns in India too. And of course, with the cheapest data that is available in India across the world. I'm happy to say that the data rates and the internet rates in India are undoubtedly the cheapest in the world. That gives an edge to India in particular and to the rest of the world also to enhance their processes and their businesses. I would like to reiterate the basic fact that it is the people who do businesses, and it is the people who will make a business successful or a failure. The finances, the infrastructure, the branding comes later. Next come the processes, which are so important and which need to be constantly and dynamically renewed. And next comes the technology in that order. This must be clearly understood, and this order has not been upset by the pandemic. Even during the pandemic, certain businesses which were at that time in downtrend, they have switched over or they have diversified their fields. They have used innovative ideas to ensure that the business does not fail, the pandemic notwithstanding. So it is the people who is most important in all these processes. It is the people who will make or mar a business. It is the leaders who will have the methodology to force ideas that they wish to. To influence the minds of others is what leadership is all about. And in social sciences, it is not important what is being said. It is more important who is saying that. Because the influence on minds depends much more than who is speaking rather than what is being spoken. These things, if we take into importance, then we will realize that digitization today is something which is most important. Now, digitization means conversion of the data and processes, but I will put across another word, which is digitalization. Digitalization is something which is quite different from digitalization, which is the need of the hour. If digitization is conversion of data and processes, digitalization is a transformation. More than just making existing data digital, digitalization embraces the ability of digital technology not only to collect data, but also to establish trends and to enable making of better business decisions. After all, why collect data? What is the use of having so much data if that data cannot enable you to make instantaneous decisions? The data should be able to give you the trends. The data should be able to help you predict in a scientific manner what is likely to happen. If the data cannot do that, then getting data, I feel, is just a waste of time. Converting data to get intelligence is what is digitalization. And I think this aspect should be clear to all of us. Coming to the word innovation. Now, innovation people talk about, but how to innovate and how to implement innovations is something which is more important. It is ultimately the implementation of a plan, the speed at which the plan is implemented and executed, that will bring much richer dividends than just making innovations for the sake of innovations and saying that we have added the word new to our product. Like it was Lux, it is new Lux. No, that would not only do. It has to have substantial changes, and minds of the people must be influenced to buy the new product that we want to launch. So therefore, innovations is a mind game in which the digital media and the new media, in particular, the social media, the WhatsApp, the Twitter, Facebook, Messenger, all these things are playing a great role in actually transforming the businesses, digitalization, and also in innovation in business management as well as social sciences. Today, even the fine arts, the tribal arts which are being brought up, the methodology which the tribals used can be transformed through technology to be sold into areas which have not seen those kind of products which are available with the tribals. Those products never reached the public. That is where the internet and the digitization and digitalization can help. Also, when it comes to increasing the reach, it is the social media which help us in increasing the reach. The trends today are in reduction of expenditure, in reduction of expenses, Because next to human beings, people, if you see in any business is there to make profit, basically. And for making profits, the expenditures got to be reduced. They got to be cut down. They got to be minimized. Howsoever rich a company may be, if the company is going to spend without thinking, without applying their mind to reduce expenditure, the company one day will run into losses. Kingfisher is one example in India. So, therefore, to reduce expenses, to have control over expenses, continuous monitoring and innovations are required. And with digital transformation, which is happening, and it is a continuous process. We cannot say that it has happened now in our company and now it is stopped. No more transformation, because technology is continuously changing. And we must be always alert and do an environmental scan to see how we can leverage technology to the best advantage of our businesses, business models, and to improve our efficiency in social sciences to get the outcome that is desired. In social sciences, it is the outcome which matters more. Also in businesses, we have all the guests who are going to give out their experiences with regard to transformation of businesses, with regard to sustainability of businesses and social sciences. And I'm happy that MIT Business School has organized this international conference, which is of great value to the students, especially who are listening to us today, to gain insights from their experiences. I congratulate once again the organizers, especially Dr. Professor Anil Vishesh, Dr. Naresh Kedia, and all the faculty members and staff of MIT Business School who have organized this conference, and all the guests who have joined us today and spared their very valuable time so that the student community can benefit from their experience. I wish this international conference great success. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
We are profusely overjoyed to hear from you, sir. Thank you so much.
We are proud to say we have Professor William Conwell, Provost and Professor at American University in the Emirates, Dubai among us. Before the American University in the Emirates, Sir has also been a chair of the philosophy department and professor of philosophy at Salem State University, Salem, Massachusetts. Dr. Conwell taught full-time in the United States at Drew University, the University of Mary Washington, and the United States Military Academy at West Point. Other than this, he is a great lecturer and assistant professor in the field of philosophy.
He also served on critical university committees, including the Academic Policy Committee, Curriculum Committee, Academic Planning Committee. Talking about education, Dr. Conwell did his PhD and MA from the University of Connecticut in the USA and BA from St. Joe State University, all in the field of philosophy. Dr. Conwell's area of specialization are epistemology, philosophy of mind, and ethics, and his area of competence are applied ethics, history of philosophy, logic, metaphysics, philosophy of language, philosophy of science, and social and political philosophy. Sir, I request you to share some significant words.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And it is a real pleasure and honor to be at this conference on digitalization, innovation, transformation, and sustainability in business management and social sciences. I really am very grateful to Amity's Business School for arranging this. And as provost of the American University in the Emirates in Dubai, we have the College of Business Administration. And I think this is a great example of a forum that other schools need to also be organizing for students and for the international community. So I really appreciate being given a few minutes to talk to everyone at this conference. And I am going to, in particular, be aiming my remarks at the students who are here at this forum, because they will be taking the future leadership roles that are going to be determining whether the digital age that is rapidly evolving in front of our eyes will be a great blessing for humanity or perhaps an unintended curse in a variety of ways. And it's really a responsibility to recognize that technology does not make its own decisions. We make the decisions about how to develop, use, regulate, and deploy technology. And we need to be very intentional about that. And that will be one of the themes of my short remarks at this forum. So as was mentioned in the introduction, and by the way, I apologize if I sound a little hoarse. I have been sick recently with some respiratory issues, and I think my voice is still reflecting that. So I hope everyone can hear me okay. But as mentioned in the introduction, I am a professional philosopher by training and by temperament. I try to explore fundamental issues to see how, as a philosopher once put it, things in the most general sense fit together or hang together in the most general sense. And so in looking at the themes of this conference, I just want to identify a couple of critical issues that I hope the students in particular will think about. I'm not really, in the time allotted to me, able to develop and articulate a lot of answers to this. So in a sense, I'm raising some questions and issues for you to hopefully take away after the conference and think about and apply in your studies and in your future careers. So I'll put my cards on the table by just saying that when it comes to thinking about management and business, I really come from the school of thought that managers and owners should take a social responsibility concept of business management, as opposed to, let's say, a more narrow shareholder model that's associated with, for instance, the distinguished American economist, deceased American economist, Milton Friedman. So to clarify this a little bit more, I believe that businesses have social responsibilities towards all of their stakeholders. And one of the themes that I'll be articulating in my remarks is that in the digital age, which by its very nature is bringing about greater interconnectedness and networking effects, along with an accelerated rate of technological development and the deployment of new social systems, new technological systems, which have often very widespread and perhaps unanticipated types of consequences, it becomes even more incumbent, upon managers in business to be thinking quite intentionally about the consequences of the actions that they're taking for all stakeholders. And this is not a new responsibility. I'm not saying that this is something that is now introduced just during this age of rapid digital transformation. But because we're looking at the consequences of business decisions and business operations, and because those consequences are becoming, the magnitude of the effects are becoming much greater through the interconnectedness of the digital age, and also, in a sense, becoming more unpredictable, because these rapidly evolving systems are harder, it's harder to predict how the actors within them, what the consequences will be. And often there's sort of an underdeveloped regulatory framework for dealing with new and innovative systems. That means there's an even greater responsibility, I think, that's required of business managers to really think quite carefully through a moral and social framework about their operations, their systems, and the decisions they make. So to return to my first point about social responsibility, the first, of course, top line, you might say, responsibility of managers is towards shareholders, investors, and owners. A business is not sustainable unless it's on a path to reliable profitability. And a company that goes out of business is incapable of doing good for anyone. So yes, that's all. I don't want any of my remarks to sound like I'm saying that profitability and responsibility towards shareholders and owners and investors is not a very important top line consideration. It is, of course. I just want to say that that's not the only consideration, and this is where some other things really need to also be prominent in the thinking of business leaders. The responsibilities towards employees, customers, towards the government, towards communities affected by a business's operations, whether that means economic consequences, environmental consequences, or other types of consequences, also need to be factored into the decision-making of an institution. That doesn't mean that every manager has to be thinking about all of these issues. It means the institution as a whole needs to be designed so that all of these issues are taken into account in the decision making. That could involve having sometimes special officers and offices that are looking at some of those issues. I think there are advantages to that, but I would argue that it's important that it not be relegated simply to one small part of a business or institution. It does need to be more diffuse in the thinking and decision making of all the managers in a business. Okay, so looking at the conference theme, we have a few key words that I wanted to look at separately. First, digitalization. So digitalization, as I see it in this context, relates to the accelerating social transformation due to the development and spread of computing technology, especially since World War II, with regard to things like first the adoption of mainframe computing in business, then the spread of desktop and laptop computers in homes and offices, followed by the development and eventual ubiquity of the internet, the rise of the smartphone and increasingly fast cellular networks like the 5G networks that are being developed in many parts of the world right now, the rise of big data and artificial intelligence. And you really see how over the past several decades, one trend has built on the previous, in some cases perhaps superseding and replacing them, like mainframe computing is not as ubiquitous in business as it was at one time because of the way that there could be networking and cloud servers and things like that. So some of these, sometimes a later development essentially replaces an earlier development, and in other cases we see a sort of stacking and building where the previous layers remain in place and new things are added on top of them. Secondly, we have innovation, which I think of as the creative development and application of new ideas and technologies to solve or mitigate problems. Third, we have transformation, which I think of as an irreversible change in systems or procedures, often prompted by social or technological forces. So the digital age has introduced a variety of transformations. For instance, the adoption of smartphones in the past, say, 14, 13 years has really been irrevocable. There's a sort of social networking effect where it's very hard for someone, even if they don't want to have a smartphone, if they're in a reasonably advanced society where the use of smartphones is very common, and cellular technology is widely available, it's very difficult to opt out of something like the smartphone. There are apps that may be required to be able to get certain government services or to be able to interact with businesses providing critical services, including utilities, for instance. So these sorts of networking effects become pretty much irreversible. And that means they also have a sort of compulsory nature to them, which again increases the social responsibility of people creating and developing these systems, because if in a sense I have no option but to have a smartphone, and the smartphone in turn has a variety of technologies that can be used to track my movements, to track my purchases, to track my web surfing, to track my use of various apps in ways that I may not understand or have fully consented to, then there's a sense in which I am potentially exploited. in ways that I really do not have control over. So again, we see this sense of social responsibility in the digital age is quite profound, because when everyone has a cell phone and everyone is using this technology, the decisions made by people, in some cases in a relatively small number of businesses, might have effects worldwide in terms of people's privacy and autonomy. The next keyword here is sustainability. And that term is often used in economics, but it really has a broader application to culture, biology, and any system that's designed to operate and persist over time. And the idea of sustainability is, can the system that's operating in the present survive and operate as well in the future as it operates now, or alternatively, if it's not sustainable, is it robbing the future for the benefit of the present? So in economics, sometimes this is thought of in terms of maybe the use of natural resources, that you might run through natural resources quickly, like fossil fuels or something of that sort, causing perhaps environmental damage along the way, but using up a resource that the future might need. I'm not sure that's really true of fossil fuels, since we have other forms of more sustainable energy, but that's an example that is sometimes given of an unsustainable economic arrangement. So what I want to encourage the students present at this distinguished international conference to think about is the role that they will be playing in introducing and managing innovative digital transformations in ways that are sustainable for social development, economic growth, peace, and human development. And to recognize that those goals, which I think we would all agree are should be the goals for humanity collectively for the future, are not just going to automatically occur by deploying more and more technology. Technology is capable of great good, but also great harm. And therefore, we have to be quite thoughtful in recognizing, as we develop and use these systems, about their consequences, and not simply take a laissez-faire attitude that that we can build it, we can deploy it, and everything will be fine. I don't think that's true, and I think it's irresponsible for business leaders to take that attitude. And I think some case studies can illustrate the examples of harms that come when business leaders have made that assumption. And I'm sorry again from being sick. I know I'm a little bit hoarse, and that's not great for a conference like this, so I appreciate your patience. Okay, so as I was just stating, I believe that the responsibilities that all the students and this conference will have as future business leaders and managers requires intentional thought and effort in the digital age. And I want to relate this to two approaches that have been taken in moral philosophy and in economics. This will go back to my earlier remark about economics. So in philosophy, one major school of moral and social and political philosophy is known as utilitarianism. And that's the theory that a person's or an institution's or a society's responsibility is to maximize well-being, where well-being is often understood as pleasure or happiness, but it can be construed in a variety of ways. And we'll put that issue to the side for now. And in developing this theory of utilitarianism, there were two approaches that were taken and that continue to be controversial and illuminating to think about. One approach is known as act utilitarianism. And that's the idea that with every action I take as an individual person, or the action that some sort of collective entity like a business or some other institution takes, every action should be measured against that standard. Will it promote the most well-being for everyone affected by this decision? So that is act utilitarianism. There's an alternative approach known as rule utilitarianism, where the idea is, instead of thinking case by case, what should I do to promote the best outcomes here collectively, the best collective outcomes, I have to instead think about following a rule where the consistent application of following this rule will produce the best outcomes. So I no longer am thinking case by case about how to have the best outcome. I'm thinking in a more, you might say, rule governed or principled way. What sort of rule can I adopt institutionally or individually, depending on the level of decision making we're talking about, that will, by following that rule over a period of time, produce the best outcomes. Now, we get a similar sort of issue in way of thinking about these issues in economics. I am simplifying things a bit, and I apologize to any economics faculty here who would want to complicate the story, because it does need more complication. But if we think about the famous Scottish philosopher and economist Adam Smith, who is often referred to as the father of capitalism, he thought that the best social and economic outcomes would not come by the individual economic agents thinking, how can I make society the best off? It's not through this sort of way of thinking socially, he thought, that would lead to good outcomes. Instead, they should follow a rule. This is similar to sort of rule utilitarianism, a rule that it just so happens anyway is hardwired in human psychology to pursue individual economic self-interest in an economic system that affords them the freedom to do so under certain ideal conditions of competition, widespread information distribution about prices, supply and demand, and so forth. So the idea is I don't have to be thinking about what's good for society. I can just think about what's good for me. And I will end up being of service to society, because as I look to maximize my own advantage, I will have to find ways to serve other people who will pay for my services or my labor or my products or whatever it is that I'm offering in the marketplace. I have to recognize their needs and serve their needs. And so even though I'm not perhaps doing it for their benefit, but for my own benefit, I will end up promoting the well-being of other people, and collectively, through this sort of invisible hand, as he puts it, there will be a good outcome for society. So this is a sort of rule utilitarian approach. Just think about following a rule of looking to advance your own economic well-being. And this way of thinking about business has had a lot of sway for the past half century. And I think actually it's done a great deal of harm. So one of the points I would hope to convince you here is that as a manager, as a future business leader, you cannot simply think about your own advantage in the marketplace. You must consider more generally the social obligations and effects of your actions in your decision making. And this is even more critical than it's been before as the digital age continues to advance, introducing widespread, unpredictable, and large-scale network effects that are potentially destabilizing and harmful. And one example, I think, that illustrates this very well is going back to 2016 and social media and the United States presidential election. And actually, there are many examples around the world. It certainly doesn't have to be this one example, but this guy investigated and covered quite a bit. So it's an interesting case study where Facebook, which is now rebranded itself as Meta, because of its interest in developing services for the metaverse. Facebook played a really critical role in the 2016 presidential election, but in a way that it didn't recognize and didn't take steps to try to think more intentionally about its role in the United States democracy. So as has been well established, there were various agents within Russia that were using disinformation and deliberately divisive and inflammatory content to target key US groups in geographical regions, that could tilt the election in these swing districts towards Donald Trump, in favor of Donald Trump in his first US presidential campaign. And this disinformation campaign was aided by the use of critical data that had been collected by the Republican Party and some Facebook third-party vendors that were sold to the Russians, given to these some of these Russian agencies for this sort of campaign disinformation use, which in turn led to creating a lot of fake accounts that used sort of strategically targeted content to spread either lies or create inflammatory social divisions that created a more polarized and extreme electorate open to Donald Trump's messaging, which really was extreme in a way that had never found widespread traction in the United States elections before. So I think a lot of the destabilization that you see in the electorate in many countries, including the United States, with more extreme candidates, more conspiracy theories, more disinformation, whether it's relating to COVID-19, vaccines, many other topics, really relates to the use of social media. And the social media platforms, and we see this with Facebook, they were really not thinking very deeply about how their platforms could be abused in this way. And it was only after the fact, when it was very clear what had happened, that a company like Facebook really stepped up and started taking this issue much more seriously. But by that time, the damage had been done, which isn't to say they shouldn't later be acting more responsibly, but the point is the damage in the past had already occurred, and it should have been something that could have been by a company that takes its social responsibilities seriously. A company like Facebook would have been more on top of this issue. So I think that what you have is a sort of way of thinking that this social media platform and technology could be deployed. It was being adopted rapidly. I mean, of course, it began at Harvard University, basically as a way for college students to like rate their college classmates' appearances and stuff like that, right? I mean, it began from such a small, humble beginning and just exploded internationally very quickly, becoming one of the world's largest companies. And I think simply Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of the top management who had I think it was Facebook had that famous expression about moving fast and breaking things. They weren't really concerned about what they were breaking. And I think they almost couldn't believe that their network could have the ability to potentially affect a United States election, presidential election in that way. So that type of thinking, I think, is really dangerous. And we're seeing again and again cases where business leaders are not exercising their social responsibilities in the digital age to ensure that their companies are acting in a responsible way. Now, can we say in 2016 that the way Facebook was used by some bad actors changed the outcome of the election? No, we can't know for sure if it changed the outcome of the election, but we do know, based on the peculiarities of the US Electoral College system and the very razor-thin margin of victory Trump had in many key states, where it's an all or nothing. You either win that state and you win all the electors in that state, or you lose the state and you get 0 electors. It's a very strange system that is used in the United States, and it means that by targeting certain districts and certain key states, that may have made a difference of a few thousand votes, which in some cases was the margin of victory in those states. So we don't know whether it changed the outcome, but it certainly could have. And it's really astounding to think that a private company could have a platform that, through a sort of negligent, benign, not so benign, I should say, neglect of how it was being used, might have changed the outcome of the most powerful democracy in the world, and all the knock-on effects that would occur after that. So I think we can see that Mark Zuckerberg's attitude exemplified a couple of key points, which is, first, you can't simply rely on an invisible hand to think that if you're maximizing your advertising revenue, the growth of your network, and so forth, that's all that you are responsible for doing. That in fact, there was a lot of harm being done to society, and that the company is accountable and responsible for that. And I think we're seeing similar issues today with Twitter since Elon Musk purchased the company. Elon Musk's rather cavalier attitude, which he states quite publicly. I mean, he's not one to withhold his thoughts on topics, which is, I guess, it's good that there's a certain transparency about that. But his cavalier attitude towards content moderation and account verification has already caused quite a bit of chaos in the platform in the 2 weeks or so since he took ownership of the company. Major advertisers are fleeing the network out of fear of having their messaging appear side by side with toxic tweets, fake accounts, disinformation, and all types of things that typically advertisers do not want to be associated with. So you could argue, even just on a very narrow economic basis, yeah, he's running the company, it seems, very poorly. But I think that it's no coincidence that Musk, who tends to take a very libertarian approach to political philosophy, a kind of each person really doesn't have responsibilities beyond honoring sort of the most basic rights of other people. I think when that attitude is used with in the digital age with very powerful companies, it blinds the management to the harms that can be done.
Professor Cornwell, sorry to be interrupting. We are a little in time, if you can.
Oh, yes. Well, in that case, let me just wrap up then. Because I know you also want time for Q&A. So I'll just stop here. And if people want to raise any other topics or issues related to this, I'd be glad to discuss it. But thank you very much. And I do hope that the students will really think about how they can, in a very intentional way, as leaders, use technology for good and not just assume that by having a growing business that is taking advantage of tech, that necessarily things are working out well for society. And so thank you very much for your time, and I'll stop now.
That was so enriching, actually, the way you mentioned about Elon Musk and how Facebook played an important role in US election. We have a lot of question and answers, sir, but we have on a distinguished keynote speaker also. So we'll request that let us all hear to them, and then we can have some question and answers, sir.
Very good,
Thank you. Thank you. Anchors, please.
I'm beyond grateful to you, sir. Thank you for sharing such valuable insights. Your session was full of priceless knowledge. We have Professor Vivek Suneja, Head and Dean Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. Professor Vivek Suneja is Dean of FMS, the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. As a fellow scholar, he studied for his doctoral degree at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. For over a decade, he taught at various premier universities in Britain, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and at the Open University. Upon his return to India, he joined FMS as Professor of Strategic Management. He served as Dean Manning and as Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi.
Professor Suneja has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, marketing, economics, ethics, culture, and public policy. Among his prominent books are Markets, a Multidimensional Approach to the Market Economy, Policy Issues for Business, and the Economics of Marketing. His latest book, Economic Theory and Policy Amidst Global Discontent, has been published by Francis and Taylor. Professor Suneja has done consulting and training work for several prominent international and national organizations. He is deeply committed to furthering societal well-being. I would request you to share some words.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. Thank you to the Vice Chancellor, Lieutenant General Sharma, the distinguished Pro-Vice Chancellors who are here, Mr. Naresh Kedia, all the distinguished faculty of Amity University, all the distinguished participants of today's conference. It's a pleasure to be here. Professor William has covered a lot of ground. He mentioned the keywords of this conference, the three keywords, digitalization, innovation, and sustainability. I'll start from the last first, which Professor Provost also talked about, sustainability, and then go on to connect it to innovation, and finally to digitization. Sustainability is no longer a luxury, it's an existential question. Today I am speaking from the hill station of Mussoorie, but till yesterday, I was at the Faculty of Management Studies at Delhi University. I'm here for a strategy meet for one of the public sector companies. And when I got here, I had difficulty breathing in Missouri because it's too rich in oxygen. My lungs are no longer used to an oxygen-rich environment. When you live in Delhi, Delhi is amongst the most polluted cities, if not the most polluted city on earth now, despite being the national capital. At the moment, farmers are burning their paddy stock. And so in addition to the millions of vehicular traffic pollution that Delhi has, there's not much industrial activity there, but the number of cars and autos that are there, and now this additional pollution that comes from burning the stubble of crops. You've seen those levels of pollution. The air is truly foul. But that's only a small part of the problem. The real problem is global warming. And I lived in Britain for 15 years. And early this year, very close to the place that I lived in, was literally on fire. I could see it on the television screens, as of all of you did. So much of Britain and Italy and Spain and California was on fire. Last year, Australia was on fire. The Brazilian Amazon was on fire. Delhi earlier this year had a temperature of 48. 48. I grew up in Delhi, and till April, there used to be spring, there used to be flowers. There was 42 in March this year. So global warming is all around us. It's no longer distant. And unless we change course now, some people say it's already too late. And The Economist, if you saw the latest cover, it said we're going to miss the 1.5 degree Celsius target. Goodbye 1.5, it said. Nevertheless, we need to do something, and better late than never. So what do we do? And here is where innovation comes in. And we have to innovate in several ways. I don't think just by tinkering around with existing technologies, just going to renewables, which we must do. We must definitely replace coal-based plants with renewable energy. Electric vehicles are getting a shot in the arm everywhere. I don't think that by itself is going to do it. That will play a role. There has to be innovation in the way we think about life. Professor Provost was talking about various utilitarian theories. The other, of course, philosophical schools, we talk about ethics as opposed to pure utilitarian schools. Mirza Ghalib, and I'll read out, I'll first say this in Urdu, which is where he wrote this couplet, then translate it to English for the benefit of those who don't understand Urdu. He once said that, this is how it goes, his couplet. Hazaron ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले, बहुत निकले मेरे अरमा, फिर भी कम निकले. In other words, I have thousands of wishes and desires, but even they turn out to be less. In other words, desires, my insatiable desires. So there's a distinction between wants and needs. Needs of human beings are essentially very few. They're physiological. You need a certain amount of food, after which it adds to belly fat and you have to go to the gym. It's amazing how quickly you consume your 2,500 calories, which is all you can afford. You need some clothes. And a country like India, where it doesn't snow most places, you don't need many clothes, frankly. And for the same reason, your shelter needs to be rather rudimentary. And those are physiological needs. Then, of course, we might need basic health, and we may need basic education. But wants are unlimited. There is no end, as Mirza Ghalib was putting it in his own time. Wants are unlimited. The Buddha in 300, Buddha was 600 BC, pointed out that the root of suffering is insatiable craving. Desires are okay, but insatiable craving, which has no limits. The Sanskrit word is Trishna, from where the English word thirst comes from. English is an Indo-European language, so most words are common to Sanskrit, the root words. The word thirst comes from Trishna, which means desperate, obsessive, insatiable craving. So if we are afflicted by craving, which is stimulated by commercial advertising, by luxury branding, even in a poor, relatively poor country like India, where a large number of people still subsist at rather low levels of subsistence. And if you're going to constantly stake up wants, we're going down the wrong way. For one, we won't be happy. And the other, the planet cannot sustain that kind of consumption. If everybody in India is going to have a car, our glaciers will probably melt. We simply cannot sustain those kind of consumption levels. So we need to innovate. It doesn't mean India has to remain poor, far from it. But we need to innovate so we have sustainable ways of growing and developing. To give you an example, and here is where innovation and digitization comes in. India is an IT powerhouse. So I'm not talking about just digitization, I'm talking about information technology in general and the role that it can play. India is an IT powerhouse. That is the only reason at the moment with oil prices so high, we have not gone to the IMF looking for loans as we did in the past, the last time the oil crisis took place, because we got an IT and a BPO sector, which earns us dollars. But can we use that to greater effect? For example, one of the biggest causes of pollution, global warming, is growth of megacities. If you're going to cluster people in their millions, Delhi has close to 20 million people, then obviously you're going to build roads, metros, you have malls with central air conditioning, people will travel long distances to office every day and come back, and there'll be obviously then global warming and pollution. And your river, the river in Delhi, Yamuna, is one big drain, no fish. I've seen fish in Yamuna when I was growing up. No fish can survive in the Yamuna today. What do? Can we build smart villages, smart towns, where people are linked through 3G, 4G, 5G, and therefore you don't need to build mega cities? Can India use its IT resources to spread economic activity? You know, the reason cities traditionally grew up, earlier they used to be for trading, but then post-industrial evolution, it was because the people needed to congregate for production, industrial production, manufacture in factories, which was powered by steam and later by electric power. But now that robos and capital intensity has gone up, you don't need many people in those factories. India, in any case, is dominated by the service economy. More than 50% of GDP comes from services. Manufacturing, industrial sector only produces about 20% of GDP or so. So we don't need these megacities anymore. When it comes to services, which are information intensive, and a lot of modern industrial economies are information intensive. In fact, entire management work, all managers do is decision making. Managers don't work with their hands. Managers use their heads. And therefore, can we do that in dispersed locations? I think the COVID taught us that one can work from home. One can also study from home. Now, there are, of course, downsides to all that, as we all know. Man, after all, is a social being. He's not an abstract creature. He needs to meet people. He needs to chat. He needs to converse. He needs to gossip. He needs to have fun. But perhaps can we do that, say, 1 or 2 days a week? And rest we can work from home. We can work from Missouri or from Goa or from wherever we are. Do we necessarily need to every single day get into our cars and drive whatever 25 kilometers? Every day I drive 20 kilometers to FMS from my place and come back, and this takes collectively about 3 hours in a day, and I could use it for better purposes. So we need to innovate. So the word innovation, and India can use its IT resources. Only then we can become sustainable. But a broader question, and then I won't take up more of your time. There are other speakers who will share the wisdom. Unless we change our lifestyles, unless we are happier with less. You know, the road that I live in is in the west of Delhi. Those of you know Delhi is called, this is called Punjabi Bagh. There is competitive, conspicuous consumption. If one person buys BMW, the next person has to buy a Porsche. So consumption is not just for functional reasons. Consumption is for symbolic reasons, for reasons of status, for reasons of perceived self-esteem. This whole business of brand not just as an assurance of quality, brand not just as a functional thing, but brand as a status differentiator. This is dangerous stuff. I think we should have sufficient confidence in ourselves that we derive joy from our own creative selves, from exercise for creative talents, from exercise of our ability to help others, not just by showing off using material products. If we continue to do that, then you need materials to produce those material resources, most of which are purely symbolic in nature. And status is a zero-sum game. I mean, you can't have everybody which is high status. Self-esteem, yes, everybody can have high self-esteem, but status is a zero-sum game. And therefore, I think we should innovate in our ways of thinking, in our cultural attitude towards life, which is what the Indians taught us. You know, if you talk about India to anywhere in the world, they'll mention Taj Mahal, or they'll talk about spirituality. Spirit is not matter. Spirit is a thing of the soul, is a thing of joy. It's not pleasure. Joy and pleasure are vastly different. So let's become all joyous. Let's work with each other, be creative. Let's have music and dance, not necessarily get all our pleasures and joys from things which are just symbolic in terms of material products. So I think this is a great conference. You've chosen a very timely topic, and I'm sure there'll be great deliberations. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Vice Chancellor, Hamilton University, and Mr. Naresh Kedia for inviting me. Thank you and all the best.
Sir, that was amazing, sir. Thank you so much for deliberating such an important keynote, sir. Your speech never fails to amaze me. So much of learning, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
please.
We are delighted to have you, sir. Thank you for being here.
We have Madam Gayatri Sharma to grace this digital avatar of the International Conference 2022. A flamboyant personage, none less than she herself tends to attract attention with her exuberant confidence and style. She is a woman backed by insights, having an immediate vicinity of such a gleaming personality in itself. Madam Gayatri Sharma is a communication specialist with 20 years experience in managing corporate and brand reputation, crisis communication, digital PR, and CSR. Ma'am is part of the India leadership team at Rolls-Royce and leads communication and community investment for his region.
She has also played a significant role in planning and rolling out internal initiatives as a part of company's COVID response team, including several initiatives to support mental well-being. Prior to joining Rolls-Royce, she led corporate communications and CSR at PepsiCo India. Some of the companies and brands she has worked with in her career journey includes Samsung, Coca-Cola, IKEA, Domino's, Hero MotoCorp, American Express, Boeing, and MasterCard, to name a few. She has served as a jury member for key communications industry awards, including the ET Brand Equity Khaledi Awards and the Falcon Awards, and regularly shares her learnings at key industry platforms. The stage is all yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that glowing introduction, and I hope I can live up to even half of it. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'd like to, of course, thank Amity University and the Vice Chancellor, and also Professor Vashisht, and especially Professor Kedia, who's put a lot of pressure on me, to do my best today to add some value to your learning. And I'd like to thank all the students here who are participating in this wonderful international conference. We've heard some fantastic keywords from the guest speakers, and I myself feel there's so much to learn every time I hear from people with so much of experience. So it's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here. I do completely, agree with so much also what Professor Suneja just said, in terms of perhaps moving a little bit towards what we need versus, gathering all that we may or may not want. But at the same time, I guess, being in the profession that I am in communications, brands have become such a part and parcel of our life, and we deal with brand building and brand reputation on an everyday basis. And I thought, since the topic is also about the new normal, which includes a lot of your, internet and digital realities, etc. Why not talk a little bit about, what it means to be working with brands in the new normal that we are in today? So let me start by saying that, I believe that every one of you in this conference who are participating are all going to be future brand ambassadors. And by that, I don't mean that you will necessarily be a Virat Kohli or an Amitabh Bachchan or Salman Khan, but I really mean as everyday ambassadors for your brands. And why that's important? Why that's important is because every piece helps in building brand reputation. And people are the most important part of that equation. And yes, the brand ambassadors like, Virat Kohli or, we've seen so many examples of these brand ambassadors making or breaking brand reputation. I mean, Sonu Sood did so much of good work during COVID, and every brand wanted to sign him up, because it'll, they hope to get a lot of the positive rub off from his reputation onto the brand. I don't know if you all remember, there was an incident when Ronaldo, picked up a couple of Coke bottles during a press conference and put it aside and said, let's have water. and the brand value of Coca-Cola fell by about $4 billion. So there's great power to make or break brands, yes, with these, big faces that brands are attached to. But at the same time, what really brings credibility to the brand is people. And I think each one of you will have to bear that responsibility, and more so today, because I believe that content is today everyone's responsibility. Everyone will have a role to play in the way the world looks at your brand. I personally believe that it's very important to find reasons to be, to think positively about the companies that you work for, and to take away the good part of it, and to be loyal to those companies that you worked for. I've worked with, I've been very fortunate to have worked either on the consulting side or on the corporate side with multiple brands. I worked with Coca-Cola, I worked with PepsiCo. Quaker was one of my favorite brands that I led. I've had an opportunity to work with IKEA, with Nokia, with American Express, with MasterCard, Samsung. And I have to tell you that I've never ever spoken anything negative about these brands, because forever I will remain loyal to them. And I believe that it is our responsibility to find what is right. And if there are things that you don't like, how do you fix them? And how do you make things work in any organization? And it will be each one of our responsibility. And why I say that content is everybody's job or responsibility is because today we are seeing, so much of content online, and everybody is posting, everybody is creating content. I have a friend who leads comms for Instagram, and they just did a whole series of road shows for creators called Creators Day. And why are they putting so much of emphasis on creators? Because content has become the king today. So I'm going to just, quickly, I think as people who are going to be brand ambassadors and responsible for how and what content goes out, I think you should also understand content, understand platforms, understand a little bit more about how to play with these and what is your responsibility, or how should you think about communicating in a sense. So I'll quickly try and share my screen, and I just hope this works. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. It's
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so like I said, I believe storytelling is now an everyday job. And I'm just putting up this quote by Warren Buffett, where he said that it takes 20 years, today probably even more, to build a reputation, and it can take just 5 minutes to ruin it. So if you lose money for the firm through your bad decisions, I will be very understanding. But if you lose the reputation of the firm, I will be ruthless. That's what he said. And there's definitely huge reasons behind it. And I'd like to probably give you an example, because I deal a lot with, media and earned media, especially, the media that reports on brands and companies. I remember an example of when I was leading the comms mandate for Coca-Cola. We had an incident in Ahmedabad at their factory where they used to have an area for storing all the products, so when they're off, when they come off the line, there's a storage area before all that stuff, gets distributed to various centers, etc., for further sales. So they had this storage area, and it was an open area, and they had some vendors who wanted to do a demonstration of creating some kind of a net to keep out the birds and pigeons and everybody, all the animals and insects which are creating a lot of nuisance in that area. So this company did a demo. They put up a net, and the next morning, when they went to the factory, there were 2 pigeons found dead, caught in that net. So next thing you know, I get a call from the client, this has happened, and it looks like, somebody's saying, somebody has called the NGOs, and there's some animal activists outside the factory. So what do we do? So we obviously deployed a couple of our local people to go to the site, talk to these people from the NGOs and say that, look, this is what happened. There was a demo kit, and which some vendor put up, and 2 pigeons unfortunately got caught in that net. And this is what has happened. So by the time, there were TV channels outside the factory. But thankfully, we were able to kind of diffuse that situation. The TV channels went back. The NGOs understood that there's nothing to do here. It's just, happened because of this net, and there are 2 pigeons that have got caught. There's no story. So they all went away. But next thing I know, I get a call from a very, very major publication. And I will not name the publication or the journalist. But the journalist tells me, so I heard that pigeons got killed in your factory in Ahmedabad. And I said, well, this is what happened. And I explained this. No, I think we might do a story about it. I said, but there's no story. Now, what had also happened was, because of all these activists and everything, the cops had caught and taken into custody 2 of the people from the vendor's side who had come to actually put up the net. So these 2 people were in the police station. And the journalist calls me and he called the client, he called me, and he was like trying to get more into the story. And we said, look, there is no story. This is what happened. It was an unfortunate mishap. And this is the demo kit that was put up. And next thing you know, he said, no, so I've spoken to the police station and they're confirming your story. And I've spoken to some of these NGOs also who were there, and they're all confirming your story, but I'm not sure. I want a statement. So we said, all right, fine. So we gave him a statement. The next morning, here's the headline. Coca-Cola caught and killed 200 pigeons in its Ahmedabad factory. So, I mean, sometimes things can be so outside of your, purview, because so many times people are motivated by so many factors. You don't always know their motivations. And when it comes to breaking news like this, people are not necessarily waiting to find out more about the realities of your story. And sometimes you also are faced with people who don't want to know your story. They've already written their story. They just want a statement from you that they can, put into that story and then just run it. Of course, we took it up very strongly with the editor, but the internet lives on. So I'm sure that story is somewhere live and, saved for eternity. So it's very important to understand the power of information. And to be honest, the way the technology is shifting, today everything is online and information is spreading so fast. I'm sure most of you don't read the papers for you as your source of news. You're either referring to InShots or, Twitter is the New Times of India, and Instagram and Snapchat are your page 3. And that has also led to a lot of fake news, just like the Ahmedabad story. And there are armchair activists. So many people who are basically putting out content without verifying what that content is. And what I mean by that is all of these WhatsApp forwards that you get. How many people stop that chain? Most people will forward that WhatsApp before they verify whether it's true or not. So an example of that, in fact, and of course, as we look at shifting trends, content has become very, very digital. So, when you're creating content, you're looking at mobile first and digital second. You're looking at influencers that you can talk through. Now, all these influencers play so much of a role. I mean, I think probably all of these influencers like Rajiv Makhani and, Miss Malini and so many others have probably got more following than journalists who are doing credible stories out there. So, and I don't mean to say Rajiv is not credible. He's an ex-journalist. But so many influencers today are also kind of, setting the agenda of what will be said about your brand. And you may or may not have control over it. You may have a relationship with them. You may not have a relationship with them. But how do you kind of, be more cautious of how you're approaching it? There's so much of chaos. Like I said, social media has become a, source for free quotes. And this is an interesting picture that I, pulled off the net. This is exactly how reporters seem to be working today. There was a time when you had to be a science graduate if you were reporting on energy. Today, it's not so. You could be an arts graduate who was yesterday writing about sports, and tomorrow you're assigned to write a story on energy. So it's literally like you have reporters being assigned to do stories on sectors that they may or may not have as much of experience in. And to be honest, I think we face that on a daily basis, because when they don't have the context and they don't have that understanding, they're also struggling to understand your story better. So, it's also about the fact that today speed trumps accuracy, like we saw in the Ahmedabad story. It was about putting a story out. He wanted to break the news. He wanted that front page. So how do you make it front page? You say 200 pigeons were killed, and you say caught and killed. You're not saying that, hey, they died. They were caught in a net. You're saying Coca-Cola caught and killed 200 pigeons. There's your front page. So similarly, there's so much of also competition that the media themselves are facing. We're seeing a lot of struggle in terms of advertising revenues, etc., which is also driving that content craziness, if you may call it that. Plus, there are also, the traditional media is today competing with the online media. We've reached a stage where every journalist has been mandated to do an online version of his or her story, because that's the demand, because you need to populate your online versions. You need to be out there. So many media houses mandated their journalists to be on Twitter because it was very, very important for them to, have a presence there. So when and what can you talk? Now, this is more from the point of view when, as a company, as a brand, yes, we're always cautious. So we do talk about, when you have some exemplary developments, you have new products, you have some reports, you have trends to talk about. Those are all great story opportunities. When a comment is appropriate, you will always be approached for so many industry stories. You would be looking at being, you see stories where journalists are talking about a particular sector and multiple organizations are quoted. Don't go out and, be in those stories just because you want your visibility there. Be there if you actually have something to say. Be there if you actually have expertise in that area. So, that's again to me a lot about credibility. And of course, lastly, crisis, I can do an entire session on crisis comms and all the experiences in my 20 years of dealing with crisis, because that's again something that today you have to react really, really quickly, because if you don't react in the first few hours, the game is lost. Today, especially in the internet age, it's like a story will spiral out of control before you know it. So how do you react very quickly? These things become very important. And to give a little bit of understanding, the way we look at media, we look at it as earned media, which is your traditional print media, TV, online mediums, news channels, visual content. We look at owned media, which is your own channels, your own website, your own social media handles. How do you, and these are the channels where you control the content, you control the narrative. And the last, of course, is paid media. You can do advertising. There are so many partnerships that you do. Today, the paid media part has risen like anything. There's no difference between earned, content that you see out there and content which is probably a paid partnership with an influencer. You don't know how, because not everybody is actually putting it clearly out there that this is a paid partnership. So much of content is going out there, and for the consumer, it's very difficult to understand what to believe. So looking at that, when you as brand ambassadors look at the entire piece of communication, you need to think about your content. You need to contextualize what you're saying, and you need to have a lot of clarity in the way you are presenting yourself. And why is, again, it's all about, of course, content, of course, is king. So there's no need to say that powerful content will always help you win. Why do I talk about context? Context is, again, something where today, as the Honorable Vice Chancellor said before, data has become, the most important thing to look at. So you will have so many sources of data that you can refer to. And from that data, there will be so many insights that you can cull out. But I always believe that from all this data and number crunching, there's a human aspect. That's where you come in. Your role is to humanize that whole data to create a context that your consumer, your audience will actually relate with. And lastly, how do you express it with clarity? Can you be really short? Can you be brief? Because I, personally believe that if you cannot deliver your message in 30 seconds, then you've probably, lost the plot. There's this quote that I'm so sorry I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. Because the truth is that, condensing your content into something which is short, brief, and really impactful is the toughest thing. And I can tell you, as someone who creates and writes content, that it's so easy to be so verbose. And when you sit down and try to crunch it, you're thinking, oh my God, I love this sentence. Oh, I love what I wrote. And then how do get out of that? So, to me, it's about knowing your audience, keeping your objectives in sight, use the data to find real insights, and humanize that data to really create the right kind of messages that you want to deliver. Find that context, and you have to be that person who is able to tell that story in a way that connects with your audience. So again, keep sight of your audience and who are you talking to? You're not talking to your CEO. And I often find that a lot of people in brand and marketing areas, you end up creating campaigns to impress the CEO, to impress your internal audiences, and you lose sight of the person who is your real audience. This is not about your PDR. This is not about your appraisal. If you really want to make a difference, you need to put the brand first. You need to think about what will genuinely make a difference. And like I said, brand building is not an overnight story. It's a journey of many, many years. So in that journey, can you make a small contribution is what you need to think about. Can you find the way to connect with your audience with a call to action? What are the 3 things that you can tell them, which are the most compelling things about your brand? And of course, I always find that people do one-off campaigns and then it just goes poof, So you've lost the audience on that message, because let me tell you, we are all inundated by so much of content that you're not actually, focused and registering any of it. You will register only when you see repeat messaging. So, it's very important to repeat and reinforce what you want to say to your audience. So I'd probably stop there in the interest of time. I know we've been running over time a lot, but thank you all again. And I hope that we'll all have an opportunity to connect again. And I'd like to thank the university, Professor Kedia, and all the faculty and students for giving me this opportunity. And I look forward to connecting with you all again. Thank you.
Ma'am, we are blessed. I think while Rolls-Royce is getting lucky. Sorry, right. Ma'am, thank you so much for taking time out and gracing the conference and speaking to our students. The words of wisdom were very enriching. Thank you so much, ma'am. Please stay online. We have more.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Anchors, please.
We are indebted to you, ma'am. Such great insights never fails to charm us. Thank you for deeming us worthy with your knowledge. A person specializing in curriculum transformation, learning design, assessment, and academic staff development who is blended towards online learning and teaching transformation. Next, we have higher education consultant from Sydney, Australia, Professor Michael Keppel. Mr. Michael is an experienced academic leader and has held formal leadership roles across 7 universities. His previous positions include Deputy Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, and Executive Director. He was also head of the Center for Learning, Teaching and Technology at the Education University of Hong Kong, head of the Biomedical Multimedia Unit at the University of Melbourne, and head of the Interactive Multimedia Unit at Central Queensland University.
He has edited 5 books and authored over 100 peer-reviewed publications. He served on the ECLite Executive from 2000 to 2011 as board member and president for 3 years and was granted life membership in 2011. He is internationally recognized thought leader who has worked in 4 countries and 7 universities.
We feel lucky to have you here, sir. We would request you to share some thought-provoking words.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today, and I think some great insights from previous presenters. What I wanted to pick up on is just a few of those before I go into my presentation. I think Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma mentioned about the new norm and transformation. We also had Professor Vijay Sanja talking about sustainability. We had William talking about a variety of the main issues coming up in the conference. And I was intrigued by one of them that he mentioned about transformation being irreversible. In some ways, I think with the education side as it comes through, I see it as very cyclic. So in going forward. Also, too, next speaker spoke about being content is king, and Gathia. And I think in some ways, what I'd like to put forward today, I think education is king and queen. And I think education is the filter and for looking at evidence and being discerning. So hopefully I picked up on a few of the points that we're looking at there, and I'll just share my screen there as we're going through. So hopefully you can see that there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So what I wanted to pick up on here today is looking at this ecosystem, which I think we're speaking about with sustainability, et cetera, as well. I want to look at technology enhanced learning, teaching and assessment. And I think curriculum transformation is the other side of the coin there. In terms of my background, in terms of looking at aspects, I'm very much coming from the higher education perspective. All of my work has been in the education side, many universities in terms of being a change agent, if you like, in going through. Taylor's University, Malaysia, I looked at the curriculum framework for professional development. I also looked at redesigning all the modules and programs that we're looking at and working very much hands-on. In terms of doing that, but also too, then during the pandemic, as we all needed to do, is to look at the idea of taking people online. Today, I'll look at the second part, if you like, because, and I present a lot on the first part, but I think the second part is very much the theme of this particular conference. This to me is the ecosystem, and I'll go through some of these aspects. 21st century skills, which are the basis of what we look at. I'll look at digital literacy, fluency, and design and talk about those. I'll talk about the teaching that we have in face-to-face blended and online, which is becoming very blurred, particularly after the pandemic. I'll look at digital assessment, and I'll look at then the entire ecosystem and come back to that as we go through. So if we look at 21st century skills, what we get down to in most universities is looking at the graduate capabilities. Now, these are graduate capabilities that are embedded into the curriculum. And when you do curriculum transformation, these are the values that every institution looks at. Now, some places may not look at this, but these are areas that are very important. They're transferable beyond the particular disciplinary context. Also, too, they're qualities that are knowledge and capabilities that students develop through their studies. So if we look at the soft skills, transferable skills, I see this as probably one of the #1 areas where we can actually look at education being the king and queen. We need to emphasize these aspects. Here's one university in Australia, and these are their graduate capabilities. I'll just pick out a couple of them. Creative and critical thinking and problem solving. What we've spoken about today, if there are issues, we need students in the future who can actually do this. Not think like ourselves, but they think in terms of trying to solve problems. Because if we haven't solved them in our generation, we need to get them thinking differently. So we need to get them being taught differently as well. Other ones there, obviously, teamwork, communication skills, professionalism and leadership, and digital capabilities is coming up there as one that they're emphasizing. So there's a particularly nice structure, and this is University of Adelaide, which is one of the what they call the sandstone universities in Australia. Here's another one that I've worked at, and I work with this in the curriculum transformation at Taylor's University. And the key ones I want to pick up here, again, you've got commonality, the problem solving, critical thinking, creative thinking skills. You've got the communication skills, lifelong learning has to be there. And also to these personal and social competencies, which look at the idea that what we're looking at here is the idea that we want students that have emotional intelligence going forward. And then the rest of the other ones, their global perspective as well. These graduate capabilities are so important and need to be embedded in the curriculum. At Taylor's University, we actually assess them. So students received a dual transcript of both their disciplinary knowledge and also their disciplinary achievement, as well as their transferable skills. To me, that's a winner because we want students who can hit the ground running when they're out there and fit in, but have the attitude and to be change agents as they're going forward. To do that with this particular presentation today, we need digital literacy, fluency, and design. Now, they are different, and I'll point you to a chapter I wrote a number of years ago. But this one here, and the way I define it is that all of us need to have a level of digital competence. This is a precursor, if you like, to digital literacy. We need to know how to use the tools and the particular hardware, software that we're looking at. So it's at a fairly basic level. When we get to fluency, it's like fluency in another language. We have to be fluent with the technology to be able to apply it, the knowledge and skills for a specific purpose in learning, teaching, and practice. So that's an important one because we're now using it as a tool to solve a problem. It's not the be all and end all having the technology. To me, the next level, and this is my background is as a designer, a learning designer, looking at this idea of digital design, which subsumes these two particular ones, but it's learner-generated content. But it's looking at it from the point as a learner, as designer. And this will come back when we talk about assessment in a little while as we go through. So these are so important to have in the curriculum as both the formal, informal aspects. And I think the fluency and the design need to be there when we look at things like the assessment. The world has changed with the pandemic, but the opportunity is there that we provide different learning opportunities to students and staff. Teaching and learning in face-to-face and blended and online learning spaces needs to be part of the ecosystem of every institution. I believe that every institution needs to have staff and students working totally online, but only a small percentage if need be, because we need to future-proof what we're doing so that if something happens in the future or we want to extend what we're doing, we've got the capability to move quickly. And that was one of the, if you like, the learnings from the pandemic. It caught a lot of us off guard and we had to move very quickly. The next part I talk about here is the spaces. And I think spaces quite generically, and I've written quite a bit in this area, there's a book there and some articles, but these are physical, blended or virtual learning environments that enhance learning. So if you can see in the photographs there, if the outdoor space enhances learning because it provides a balance for the student, that's a good learning space. If it's a classroom, if it's a cafeteria, that's a learning space. These spaces need to motivate the learners to learn. The big thing about this is that we want both staff, teachers and students to look at the space and think about how they can actually use it as a learning space. So when I look at a particular classroom, I might come up with 10 strategies I can use for teaching: group work, individual work, full group, student presentations, etc. We want both students and staff to recognize that. And this is again about this empowering in education. But all the spaces need to promote authentic learning as well, which is getting into this real world problems that we need to solve. And I'll get to that when we talk about assessment in a moment. Here's another one from a particular place. You can see the synergy between the space and the outdoors and the indoors, the quiet space or the group space that we're looking at. Before the pandemic, this tended to be a particular model worldwide of what we're looking at. We had our formal on-campus teaching spaces, and these are the ones that are teacher-led, classrooms, and different areas as well. We had the informal on-campus learning spaces, which could be designed by the institution or the ones that they may go to, like the cafeteria or the eating areas and so forth as well. We had online learning and teaching spaces if people were doing a little bit of what's called blended learning, a percentage where we'd go online. And so there needed to be a balance between these. And most of the institutions I worked at had probably about 20 or 30% in the online learning and teaching space, the rest of it online. And that was, rest of it was face-to-face, I should say. And that was a nice balance of how we did the learning and teaching. If we look at blended learning, it needs to be done at an institutional level. It needs to look at these spaces and choreograph the best advantage for the students. I believe it's going to be changing after the pandemic, and I'll get to that in a moment. But in blended teaching, this is where the teacher needs to look at the different spaces that they're looking at and the student and see how they can learn in those particular spaces. If they need a quiet space for reflection, can they do that online, or do they do that in a quiet space on the campus? If they want a busy space to actually work with a group, do they like a quiet space or a noisy space? Or do they do that online and then follow up afterwards? But this gets back to this idea of affordance, which is about action possibilities in terms of what we're looking at in terms of going forward. With blended learning, for the learner, we want active learning. And again, this gets into the student-centered learning that we're looking at, which is both interactive with resources, network with other students, and also looking at this idea of authentic assessment as we're going through. So what I'm looking at here at the moment is the educational ecosystem has changed. This is what the post-pandemic looks like, that most institutions, to future-proof what they need to do, need to look at this side of things, need to work out what we do in the face-to-face campus, and maybe it varies for different year levels and for, say, things like work integrated learning. Also, too, what we do in the online campus, where we actually may look at different options for micro-credentials, for students who are going to look at final year students, etc., as we're going through. So these are, if you like, changes that we look at. One of the biggest changes that came out was this hybrid flex, where you could actually teach students in front of you, but at a distance as well. And this occurred because student movement was hampered due to the pandemic, and many institutions around the globe had international students. So again, some differences that we can look at. We needed to look at different sorts of pedagogies. Authentic learning and teaching needs to be in there, because if we want our students to change the world, they need to be real world problems that we're solving, and it needs to be of an authentic nature. We need self-directed learning so students can actually learn in their own way, showing initiative and responsibility as we're going through. We still want teachers to guide the learning, but we need to be proactive, and we need to motivate and guide the students as we're going through. Other ones we look at, things like project-based learning, I think are very much student-centered. Provide the student with the problem to solve and get them working through it in a group, because that's the real world setting as we're looking at it. Problem-based learning has been used extensively in medicine and other areas as well, case-based learning in law. So these are different pedagogies that put the onus on the student and to be a problem solver, and to get them thinking about how to solve different problems as we go forward. I'll look at a couple of these in going forward. So the authentic learning is probably the first one, providing an authentic context that is a realistic problem, authentic activities, looking at different ways where students can reflect and have coaching and look at the assessment as they're going through. So there's different strategies, and there are different formulas or recipes that you can look at for this in terms of in the teaching. And it's a very nice way forward. I'll jump to one other one here in terms of problem-based, because I had a lot of work to do with, say, looking at the idea in Melbourne University. I worked in a problem-based learning curriculum. So a problem, it puts a stress on prior knowledge of the learners, and it gets the students to look at deep learning. It looks at the knowledge obtained through the collaborative teamwork in problem solving. So the group can come up with a better solution than one person. And for big problems that we want to solve, these are the ones we need to look at. Knowledge is constructed independently by the students as they go through the cases, and they serve as a stimulus for getting the right answers. In medicine, it comes through in terms of finding the right diagnosis, coming up with the hypothesis about what it could be with the patient, and then narrowing it down to what they believe it is by the end. And this is what they have to do on a daily basis. I'll flip ahead here through to digital assessment then. And I think this is a key. All of what we need to do has to have good pedagogy, has to have a good ability to get students being student-centered. We need to motivate the learner to solving problems. And digital assessment is a vehicle for doing that, and can be quite useful, but it has to be authentic. We need to look at real life situations. We need to look at engaging and worthy problems or questions of importance. And this to me is probably the number one aspect we need to look at in assessment. It needs to be worthy of engagement, and it's a question of importance. If we have all of our students across institutions across the globe working on worthy problems or questions of importance and discerning that from a particular institutional level, then that would be a landmark, because it would allow different sorts of thoughts and ways going forward. And this is where assessment comes into the core, whether you're face-to-face, blended or online, is so important. If we look at this one here, that it is the de facto curriculum. Assessment basically looks at this idea that student assessment defines the de facto curriculum. So if we get this right, we actually can change how learning and teaching occurs. It has a greater influence on what students learn than anything else. And what influenced the students most was assessment as we're going through. This is a project I undertook in Hong Kong where we looked at learning-oriented assessment. So we made the assessment task not only about achieving a threshold, but it became a learning task. And it determines the student effort. We got students involved in the assessment process so that they would determine being able to judge the quality of their work. But we also looked at this idea of forward-looking feedback, or feedback as feed forward, as I call it, to provide some feedback to the students so that they can act on it. And I'll come to that in a moment. If we look at some of the other aspects in terms of technology enhanced assessment, is it has the potential for developing new forms of assessment. So we don't want to just do the same thing, quizzes, exams, etc. The spaces or the affordances of the online environment allow you to think about developing new forms of assessment. Reflection is a classic one. That if we want a student to reflect, you need to give feedback, and a blog provides the perfect tool to have interaction with other students or with the teacher as you're going through. If we look at this idea of the affordance a little bit further, it's reimagining for assessment purposes and practices of facilitating new opportunities for participation. And there are many ways to actually go about, and this is an older article, but very worthwhile in terms of looking at. If you are interested from an institutional point of view, this is probably one of the better ones. Around the globe, they have assessment toolkits. This is from the University of New South Wales. And when I worked at Taylor's University, I used this particular toolkit to back up the work I was doing in assessment design and change. And it looks at, this is assessing a capstone project, the benefits, challenges, strategies, etc. as well. So there are resources out there that help you change your assessment if you're looking at it in terms of it. And again, a lot of work that can be done in those particular areas. One way to look at it, this and to get student buy-in into assessment is the use of rubrics. At Taylor's University, I think we worked at 3,000 pieces of assessment using rubrics. The reason why rubrics are very useful in assessment, it sets the standard for the student and the teacher about what will be assessed, but also sets the criteria. Language is important. So you're beginning, developing, mastering, outstanding. And this is for a particular media project. And it can be useful as a guide then, particularly if you look at projects that have multiple phases, to provide feedback to the students. You might say, oh, you're at the developing phase now because this is sort of the criteria we're using. But if you do this, you can easily get to the mastering by the next phase. If you look at these aspects, I'm sure you could probably get to outstanding. So again, there's some interesting points about that in terms of going through. One thing I did at Taylor's University when I had to take people online, so I personally took ownership of that. I was Pro-Vice Chancellor there, learning and teaching, but I was very hands-on and pragmatic about what I was doing. We had 600 staff about to teach 11,000 students. Instead of looking at how to teach in the online environment, although they had experience with blended learning, what I did is I said, how are you going to assess in the online environment? And so I did a survey, and this survey set the stage for the webinars and then getting people to actually present to each other on different aspects. Here you can see what online assessment tasks are you using in your online teaching. So they changed their thinking to go to assignments. They looked at, instead of the closed book examinations, they went more for open, restricted, fixed time examinations, and they were very effectively used. It could have been 5 hours, 7 hours, 12 hours, whatever it was. So you can see the range of different activities that you can look at in terms of this, and I listed them down in order that they were actually using. Assignments, can have a variety of ways. Online group work, online group presentation were nice at 3 and 4. Online individual presentations online. Online reflective journal, all the way down to using e-portfolios, etc. as well. So again, this was the leverage I used for teaching in the online environment. The rationale is if you can assess online, you can start to use all the tools in the learning management system that allows you to actually teach in that particular environment. I'll look at the next part of the challenge, and a lot of research in assessment these days is going into this particular area. It's going into the idea of feedback, and there is a feedback challenge. So the part in red is the important part, is that we'll get to that in a moment, but high quality feedback has the potential to have one of the strongest influences on students' achievement. Despite recognizing the value of feedback, and at least in Australian settings, and commonly voicing dissatisfaction with the quality and quantity of feedback received, students often appear to make limited use of feedback. So this is one area that can change the dynamics. And Winston and Carlos have written a beautiful book on this area, and it's David Bowd's another one who's doing some great research in this area as well. So the feedback challenge is, although we may provide constructive feedback to students in the form of comments, feedback cannot take place without the students' active involvement. So we might give feedback, but we need to see the evidence that they're using going forward. From an institutional point of view, I think this is a really great way in terms of looking at the importance of feedback. And this is from Timmis, Broadfoot, and Sutherland from the UK. Indeed, it could be said that an institution, culture, or society encapsulates its conceptualization of learning and its future citizen by how it creates and uses assessment. So assessment is so important in how we go about it. If we get back to that point I made before there, if we looked at worthy problems, problems of importance, and we had students around the globe working on these worthy problems, we'd have an incredible group momentum to actually make some change in terms of what we're looking at in whatever society we're in. And I think that's the important part with the importance of assessment. And whether you do it online or face-to-face, it still needs to have the essence of being student-centered and having students working on authentic tasks as we go through. I'll finish up here just with one last slide here. And what I talk about here is the learning, teaching, and technology ecosystem. And this is a bit of a summary, if you like, of this presentation, also touches on some different areas. If we go down the far side here, if we want an ecosystem for online learning, teaching, and assessment, or just in ecosystem for learning and teaching and assessment, curriculum design and development needs to have the principles of how we're going to do it. So whether it's face-to-face or online. We need to have online learning approaches like the self-directed learning that I've spoken about. We need to look at online teaching approaches like project-based learning. For the assessment, we need fewer examinations. Examinations shouldn't not be the majority of how we assess students at institutions. Now, I know that varies in different parts of the world, but they probably the single biggest thing that we need to change. We need online formal learning spaces so that are teacher-led and collaborative spaces, online informal learning spaces that are student-led. In terms of the online teaching spaces, they need to be both synchronous at the same time and asynchronous. We need to have the student voice in the design of spaces and teacher-learner partnerships. One of the big projects I did years ago was in learning spaces, where we involved students in the design of learning spaces at a variety of institutions in Australia. Online professional development is a given these days. It's a very effective way, but they need to be evidence-based webinars. And I think I gave the example whereby we looked at a survey to say, you want different aspects about these particular forms of assessment, we'll do something in that area. So everything has to be looked at in terms of priority. We need to look at the existing technologies, the learning management systems that you have in your institution, the lecture capture, if you record them, the Zoom, the Teams, etc. as well. We also need to look at new technologies, enhanced Wi-Fi, and so forth as we're going through. And really encompassing this, if you like, around this is the organizational culture. We need to be forward-looking, adaptable, and innovative. And I think to look at that, it goes back to my first point that I mentioned today, that we need to look at the graduate capabilities and the transferable skills of the students, as well as the student-centered nature of learning, teaching, and assessment, whether it's face-to-face, online, blended, as we go through. So I'll leave it there. It's a quick overview of I think an ecosystem, but an important one. I think if we're going to solve these big problems, the sustainable goals that we have by UNESCO, I believe it is, and I think they're the ones we need to look at to frame what we're doing in going forward. So I'll stop there anyway. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Capel. That was very enriching in terms of how the universities, the entire education systems which function. That was very enriching. Anchors, please.
Your words truly opened our minds. We thank you for elating the savior of this episode with your charm. We had received around 100 research papers, out of which several were selected on the basis of content, conciseness, and quality.
We are delighted to say that we received the participation of brilliant minds from top-notch B schools and companies like IIM, ISB, XLRI, SP Gen, including companies like Deloitte, KPMG, Reliance, Tata Group, and many more. We have compiled all the selected research papers consisting of facts, theories, and real-time information into a book form.
We request all the dignitaries present to release the book of proceedings.
Right. That was an amalgamation of all the research papers, articles, and different innovative and creative research which we have received from across the world. Just wanted to let the dignitaries know. I just have, ma'am, dignitaries, couple of questions which we have received from the students. There are a lot many questions, but because of time constraint, I'll just stick to one from each of the keynote speaker, starting with Professor William Cornwell. Sir, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Sir, first of all, can we call it a post-COVID world now? And do we think we are more experienced in terms of sustaining our businesses, our lives, if we can call it a post-COVID world? So are we more experienced, or what more things we need to look at in and has to be very sincere in terms of sustainability in a post-COVID world? Sir.
That was addressed to me, is that correct?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Thank you. Are we in a post-COVID world? Well, of course, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that in some parts of the world, the epidemic conditions are not over, and they're not in a post-COVID world. They're still in the COVID issues of a health crisis and the adaptations that are being made to that. On the other hand, here in Dubai, for instance, just recently, all the restrictions were lifted, all the protocols. The only restrictions are some minor ones related to healthcare facilities. So in Dubai, certainly it does feel like we're in a post-COVID period. And there have certainly been transformations, but I think those transformations are, some of them are sticky, you might say, in higher education. For instance, I think that there have been some fundamental technological changes where new techniques and uses of learning systems, not that the learning management systems were new, they were there all along, but their adaptation and adoption is much more widespread. And I don't think that's going to change, because now we've had a couple of years of instructors and professors who have very quickly been trained to use those tools, have seen the advantages of them. Students have also been using those tools and have become familiar with them. And that's true not only in higher education, but at younger ages, so that those students also were prepared when they enter, for instance, higher education, to have more online and blended learning experiences. So, so I do think that's an example of the sort of irreversible transformation I mentioned before. I don't think higher education really can take a step back from what's happened. But I think in other areas, it remains open exactly what it means to say we're in a post-COVID era. So we had a discussion about cities, for instance. It still seems to be up in the air how many workers are going to be returning to offices on a, say, a 5-day-a-week schedule. Some companies tried to rush that and maybe have relaxed that schedule. We've seen it's having huge effects on real estate prices and settlement patterns. So I think that's, I'm not a prognosticator. I can't really say what the future of the city is going to be in a remote work, but clearly we're still in an unsettled period that's occurred as a result of COVID. I do think, though, that what we can say is that COVID has definitely accelerated trends that were maybe going at a much slower pace prior to the pandemic. For instance, with higher education, there was certainly a move occurring to have more online and hybrid experiences, but higher education was not always very nimble at moving that process along. And so necessity is the mother of invention. Universities had to adapt very quickly, and they've discovered what they can do and the benefits of that. And that's all very, very positive. So I'm not sure if I've really addressed that question in the way perhaps the person intended me to. I apologize if I've not given the sort of answer that.
No, sir, the answer is completely perfect, and we could not agree more. So thank you,
Thank
sir. The next question is for Madam Gayatri Sharma. Ma'am, thank you so much for putting so much insight on social media and how media trials are happening nowadays on Twitter, on Instagram. Ma'am, it has been seen from the history that too much of anything leads to its decline. Now, in last 5 to 10 years, there is too much of social media. We started with Orkut. Facebook is declining. You know that the users in Facebook are more on Instagram, more on Twitter. So do you think that too much of social media in coming decade will lead to the decline of social media, and there might be a different kind of advertising which may emerge? What is your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I've myself also kind of been really, that's a burning question in probably a lot of our minds, and not one that anyone can probably answer with any finality, really. But I do believe that, yes, too much of everything, is could lead to a decline. But I think at this time, if we look at the way the trends are, it's just that, the trends are shifting, but social media is continuing to grow very strongly. So people have shifted from, static content to a lot more visual video content. So even Instagram, if you see their own journey, they very quickly tapped on to TikTok being banned in India, and Reels became so big thanks to India, and it became much more successful. And now if you look at I see so many creators also posting on Insta static posts with as reels, with music in the background, saying the only way that people are looking at my photographs is if I actually make it into a reel. So that's a trend. So similarly, I believe that there will be trends that will shape the way consumers are using social media and the way they are consuming social media. But yes, I think there will slowly, I do believe that there will slowly be an awareness that there is too much of consumption of content on social, which is leading to a lot of time which could be your productive time that's going towards just surfing the net. And surfing is the net is so addictive. I mean, we all go through those, and I think now the next trend is probably going to be about the de-addiction and how to be more productive and how to limit your time and use it more judiciously on while you're online. But whether it will really decline or it will just change in terms of its characteristics and how people create and consume content, I think time will tell.
Right, ma'am. Very, very important words of wisdom. Time will tell. So we all are here and we'll see how advertising world shapes up in the future. My next question to Professor Michael Capel. Sir, you spoke a lot about universities in terms of how assessment, examination, pedagogy have changed in last couple of years. So at this point in time, still the number of admissions, the number of students in the physical space of university is high in comparison to the virtual space. So do you think in next 1 decade, the physical university will take a step back and digital university will start flourishing to a very large extent, and their admissions, their content, their pedagogy will rule over the physical space of the university? What's your thought on that, sir?
It's a great question. And I think from the pandemic, I think that was many people's fear that we'd go to the online university. As an educator, you pick the best space for learning and teaching. I still think we need the bricks and mortar of universities, but I think every university these days needs to have an online presence. And what I mean by that, it could be that the university has maybe 2 or 3 degree programs that they do online, or several subjects, or they may mirror what they're doing in the face-to-face environment in the online environment to open up further markets. I don't think it's going to take over because you can't get away from the interactions. Generally, students coming out of grade 11 and 12, they want the social experience. They want the campus experience. But those who are doing in their, say, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're wanting to do postgraduate studies, they may not want to go back to the campus because they're busy juggling family and their own work. They want to do some postgraduate studies to change their job. So I think what we're doing, and there was an opportunity, there was a catalyst, and I think William mentioned this before, there was a catalyst to make change to online learning, teaching, and assessment. What it's done, it's increased the quality of what we're doing there. And if you look at the Horizon report, or you look at the EDUCAUSE reports, Horizon reports or EDUCAUSE report, and the Open University UK reports, it talks about that quality has improved, and I think that's good. So I don't see the world going that way. I think it needs to be there. I think India, you've got one of the largest online universities in the world. Australia has a presence there as well. You need to cater for different students and what they need to be able to do. Some of us enjoy the face-to-face environment only. Some of us enjoy a little bit online, but you need to do it for the right reasons. So I think the future is good because we've now got to a higher level of pedagogy and learning and teaching and assessment in the online environment, which means that they're pretty close for what we can actually do. And I think that's a good sign. The balance we need to choreograph at our own institution, I think. And I don't see totally online overtaking face-to-face anytime soon.
Right, sir. Very well said, sir. That's a very important and interesting take. Ankit,
Professor Michael, I completely agree to what you said. If I may also humbly request the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, for his views on the same question, because that's a very apt question when it comes to universities and how, over a period of time, the shift would happen. Sir, please.
In my opinion, the online learning can never replace physical learning in totality. Because certain traits by the students, the character building, development of personality, their ability to react to different situations in life, their ability to do work in a team, their ability to influence others in physical mode through body language and other things which are more prominent in physical mode, and their peer-to-peer learning, which also happens. So all these things cannot be replicated by online. So therefore, in my opinion, the physical learning will continue to dominate. But online learning, when it comes to taking the best of the lectures which are available in videos, the best of the material, study material which is available, some of the online capsules which can be taken will stay, and they will, of course, coupled with technology and with availability of bandwidth going to remote places, remote corners of the world, villages everywhere being more covered, internet speeds increasing, that will also have its way. To my mind, it appears today that online learning will be restricted to about 20% to 40%, not more than that. But 60 to 80% will have to be physical learning, peer-to-peer learning, because learning involves not only theoretical learning, it involves much more, and particularly character building and personality development, which is very much in line and required for the students at the university level. So thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, sir, for this, and I completely agree to your words of wisdom. Thank you so very much, sir. Before we pay our gratitude to all the speakers for sharing their thoughts, valuable thoughts with the students, I'll request all the panelists if they can switch on their videos for a quick click, because it's very tough to get such renowned speakers on one particular frame. Thank you so much. Naresh, Dr. Naresh, if you can do a quick click.
right, sir. I'll just take two.
Thank you. Over to the anchors.
We are overgraced to announce our sponsors who supported us throughout the conference. Career Launcher,
Time Institute,
Renaissance,
Teach Fitness,
Manas Polymers. I would request the honorable guests to please accept the memento as gratitude of appreciation from Amity. Professor William Cornwell. Thank you, sir.
Professor Vivek Suneja. Thank you, sir.
Madam Gayatri Sharma. Thank you, ma'am.
Professor Michael Keppel. Thank you, sir. We thank you all for enlightening the event with your presence.
Thank you to all the renowned speakers who gave their valuable time and thoughts to all our students. We at Amity University, Madhya Pradesh would be in touch with you and would continue to take this relationship to contribute towards our university and towards MBAM. Thank you so very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You may close the session now, please. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Anchors, please.
Yes, sir. We'll now play the audio visual of the distinguished sponsors of the conference.
The time has come for a short break. We'll meet you again shortly in the valedictory session after lunch at 3:30 p.m.
Thank you.